So you guys had a good afternoon? How were the cheetahs? Were they out? Did you see them? Good. Okay.
I saw two of them.
Cheetahs
Nobody else saw the one in the bushes.
Well, you're the expert cheetah spotter. I'm going to train you to be an expert elephant spotter. It's very difficult to spot elephants, isn't it?
No, it's not.
It's harder than you would think, depending on the context.
Yeah.
I'll explain that to you.
It's depending on if they're big or small.
That's true. That does play a part. I agree with you. All right. Is this one big or small? Yes, this is definitely a big one. Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to the Asian elephants. You are looking at Raja. Raja was born in captivity here at the St. Louis Zoo 22 years ago. So he's a full-grown male Asian elephant. You can see his tusks. Talk a little about those in a minute. Raja is a member of the class of elephants called Elephas maximus. It's Latin for big elephant. Right. Duh. Okay. They're part of the class of animals called, I'll never get this right, proboscideans. Okay. You ever heard that word? Actually, you may have, you just don't know it. Does anybody know what a proboscis is? It's your nose, that's correct. Okay. So, these animals are named after them. They're probably their most prominent characteristic besides their size, which is their most unique nose, and it is indeed most unique. You'll find very few like it, if any, outside of the elephant family. Okay, these are Asian elephants. If you guys look on your map, in your books, if you still have them, you'll see the countries marked in dark markings where the habitats of the Asian elephant are. They're in places like India and Nepal on the subcontinent. Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, those kinds of places. China, southern China have habitats. And then Indonesia, the island nation of Indonesia. Okay, those places are significant. If you draw a circle around all those places, you're drawing a circle around between 40 and 50% of the world's human population as well. Between China and India and Indonesia, those are 3 of the 5 largest, most populous countries in the world. So you can imagine there's a challenge when it comes to Asian elephants and their habitats are being encroached upon by human development and population growth. Every time the population grows, they need more fields to farm, more houses to live in, more cities to build, more parking lots to pave, all of those kinds of things. All of those come out of the hides of the elephant's habitats, as you can well imagine. So it's no surprise to anybody that the Asian elephants are decreasing in population rather rapidly. About 50 to 60 years ago, there were between 50 and 70,000 Asian elephants indigenous in those countries. Today there are 25 to 35,000. So about half of what there was, perhaps less than there was even 50 or 60 years ago. There's another reason why the elephant population is decreasing, and a rather tragic one. Actually, now that Raja's out, it's real easy to see what it is. Asian male elephants and African ones as well have tusks. Those tusks are made of ivory. That ivory is very valuable on the open market for all kinds of interesting trinkets and baubles and jewelry and stuff. It commands a very high price, and that price can be gained by anybody who wants to go out with a big gun and shoot an elephant and cut his tusks off. Right? So elephant poaching has been by and large banned worldwide. That unfortunately has not stopped the poaching of elephant ivory. You still see, numbers I'm hearing are right, somewhere around 100 elephants a day being either poached or dying from other unnatural causes. And so that elephant population is continuing to decline. That's an issue for all kinds of reasons, not just habitat challenges, but the smaller those populations get, the lower the genetic diversity of those populations, makes those populations less and less viable as the population shrinks. So you can imagine the study of these elephants, the protection of their habitats, the appreciation for the unique things about these rather majestic animals, if a bit ugly, is important. And so places like the St. Louis Zoo and other places are important, not just to people who value these animals, but to people who value the creation that God made and the charge that we've been given to protect it and to keep it. It's one of the things that God gave us as a commission when He made us, is to keep the things that He made for us, for our use and for our enjoyment and for our appreciation. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later too. All right. Size and weight. How big do you think Raja is? How tall? Go ahead.
12 feet.
He's about, I would say, between 10 and 12 feet. Yeah, tall. He weighs about 5 tons. So about 10,000 pounds for a full-grown Asian male elephant. The African variety is a little bigger than that. The Asian elephant's about 5 tons for the male, about 3 tons for the female. So between 6,000 and 10,000 pounds for a full-grown male or female or male, respectively. Let's talk about something a little closer to your size. Okay, a newborn male Asian elephant calf. Somebody guess how much that would weigh. Go ahead. About 250 to 300 pounds when it's born, when it's newborn. About 3 feet high. Okay, so let's see. You 8 pounds 20 inches. Okay, when you were born, right? How long did that take? 9 months. Okay, so the human gestation period is about 9 months. 300 pounds, 3 feet. What's the gestation period for an Asian elephant? 22 months. 22 months, so almost 2 years for a female Asian elephant to have her baby. Almost always singles, every now and then, very rare, but possible, twins. We won't delve into that one too much. So you can appreciate the challenge that a mama elephant has, for sure, when they're producing those calves. They will typically have one, and then between 2 and 4 years later, 2 to 5 years sometimes, have another. So perhaps every 5 years, they'll be charged with a childbearing range of about 20 years, I think, if I'm not mistaken. All Asian elephants are herbivores. Somebody know what an herbivore is? What's an herbivore?
Something that eats plants.
Yes, that's right. They do not eat meat, assuming unless they're desperate. They will eat anything else. Okay, so branches, trees, leaves, grass, hay, tree bark, fruits, vegetables. An Asian elephant full grown requires between 200 and 300 pounds of feed a day in order to maintain their body weight. So they can't be too terribly picky about what they eat. If you calculate that proportionally and say how much would that be equivalent for a human my size, it would be about 6 porterhouse steaks a day to bring in the weight of food that an elephant has to ingest. A lot of it is expelled, some of it is retained for nutrients. But you can imagine 200 to 300 pounds of feed a day, how much land it would be required to feed a small herd of a dozen or 2 dozen elephants, how many square miles of land that you would require to have enough feed for 200 to 300 pounds a day for every single one of those elephants. It's one of the reasons elephant habitats have to be so large is because they eat so much food. Right? So the amount of food available in their habitats really is the defining fact in how many elephants are going to be in that area, how much food that area can sustain. All right, let's get to my favorite part of the elephant, the trunk. Okay, my goal is to convince you, A, that the Asian elephant is the best animal to study today, and that the trunk is the coolest part of the animal. Okay? Yes, this. Exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, the trunk is the most fabulous multi-purpose tool ever invented by man. Your fathers may have cool multi-purpose tools that they spend 20 bucks for and hang on their workbench, but they do not do anywhere near the things that an elephant's trunk does. Okay? And you can see it just by looking at it. Just by standing here for a half hour at the beginning of the day today, I saw that elephant do at least a dozen different separate things with its trunk that are uniquely designed into the structure of that particular organ, the trunk. Number one, it's his primary sensory organ. An elephant's eyes aren't all that great, but his sense of smell is acute. He can smell very faint smells several miles away. It's how he locates his own kind. It's how he locates his food. So that's one of the things that it does. It assists in his sense of taste as well. Elephants are very dependent on tasting the things they're eating to make sure they're eating the right things. And so that is a particularly useful capability of the trunk. It's very tactile, which means its sense of touch is very fine and distinct. That'll become important in a couple of ways I'll describe to you in a minute. An elephant's trunk is the greatest weight lifter in the history of the mammalian species. So an elephant's trunk can lift between 600 and 700 pounds dead weight. So if you're 100 pounds, 6 of you, right? Up in the air, no problem, all at the same time, okay? If he wants to uproot a small tree with his trunk, he can do it and often does. So an elephant can do major things with that trunk simply by wrapping it around, planting his feet, and doing his business, okay? At the same time, if you look at the end of that trunk, where the thing that looks like a nose is, I guess it really is a nose, there's a prehensile digit, if you will. The African elephants have two. The Asian elephant has one. It's a prehensile digit, almost like a finger, and he can use that with the other end of his nose, the other side, to grapple very small articles like a leaf or a twig. And so he can go from moving trees out of the ground to picking up a little twig with that same organ that's attached to his head. Okay? How many muscles do you have in your body? Take a shot.
300.
639 is the correct answer. You're within the right order of magnitude. 639 muscles in the human body. How many muscles in an elephant's trunk?
1,000.
Between 40 and 100,000, depending on their size and age. This is a close-up picture of an elephant's trunk. You can see in all those crevasses and folds all the articulated muscles that make up the elephant or the trunk of an Asian elephant. Between 40 and 100,000 separate muscles. When you look at that trunk and how he manipulates things, how he picks up feed, how he sucks in water, how he grapples that feed into chunks before he puts it in his mouth, it's absolutely amazing to see how many ways that elephant can move that trunk to do the things that he wants to do. Okay? You can also use it as a snorkel when he swims. Alright? And he does. Which is the reason I would like a trunk. Okay? But having said all that, what I'll say is the unique thing about the trunk is every component of that trunk is interdependent with the others. Okay? So to postulate that a trunk evolved over millions of years is actually quite preposterous, because no individual component of it has any reason for existence without the interdependent purposes of all of the other pieces that go with it. If you look at inanimate objects that anybody, regardless of their worldview, would say were clearly designed, and you compared it to something like the elephant's trunk, you would have to declare logically that there is clear evidence for design in something like an elephant's trunk, because of the infinite irreducible complexity of the object itself. It can't exist as a system with all of those pieces being there at the same time. So positing that it could have developed component by component is actually quite preposterous based on what we believe about what characterizes evidence for design in even inanimate objects. So all you have to do is look at the elephant's trunk and you see the mark of a God who made it. Okay? So I would argue that the elephant's trunk, at least among the mammalian species, is probably one of the most compelling evidences of design in the animal kingdom, because of all of the ways that God made it to work uniquely the way it does. If an elephant loses his trunk or it's injured, that elephant will not long survive. Okay? He requires that trunk for too many different things, too many different purposes. He would soon starve for all kinds of different reasons if he lost the use of his trunk. So, there's something unique about it that God wanted us to pay attention to. I'm convinced that if you look at all the animals, you guys, you will see those kinds of things in each and every one of them. You will see something so compelling, so unusual, so clearly evidenced of design that you have to look at it and say, somebody made that. Okay? Somebody made that for a purpose. And it's for a purpose that I need to appreciate and understand. Not just because I find the animal fascinating, but because I find the God who made it fascinating. That's the coolest thing to me about the study of animals. It isn't just the marvelous things that we learn about them themselves or their relationship to their environments. It's the marks that the Creator has put on each of them, sometimes even individually. Okay, because some of these animals show clear signs of personality, if you will. Clear behavioral patterns, characteristic preferences that are unique to them alone. Okay? Those kinds of qualities aren't accidents, guys. They're purposeful. And they're there to point us to something that's not only larger than ourselves, but it's larger than the world that we live in. It's to point us to the God who made them and to make us worship Him. So, you can go to church and have a worship service, or you can come to the zoo and have a worship service, because every single one of these animals is declaring the glory of God in a way that's absolutely unique to them. Do you get that? Does that make sense to you guys? So you know what? I think it'd be wonderful if some of you guys became scientists and biologists and botanists and all those kinds of things, because you know what? You will have the capability to appreciate God's creation in a way that nobody else can, right? And add something to our understanding of the way that God made the world that'll make all of us appreciate not only that world, but the God that made it all the more. So, if you guys want to be scientists, I'm cool with that. Okay? That would be very cool. Okay? Maybe some of you could even work here. If you don't, then all you have to do is donate to the cost of feeding the elephants. Okay? Which my friend Jerry tells me is $50,000 a year per elephant.
My goodness.
Okay?
Is that why there's only one elephant?
There are 10, I'm told. So, you do the math and you see how expensive and how many hours it takes to care for these animals, which are quite a unique collection. I understand. Yes, I'm glad you asked. Absolutely. So the first advantage would be hearing. So elephants can hear sounds at very low frequencies, below the audible range of human beings. From what I understand, they use those sounds and generate them as well to communicate amongst themselves at great distances. That's one of the reasons they have large ears. The other and equally important one is because the elephants, the body area, the surface area of the skin isn't enough to bleed off all of the heat that's generated by that body. So the blood flows through the ears, some of it anyway, and when those ears are articulated towards the wind or etc., it acts as a radiator, a cooling system for those elephants. So those ears are very definitely a coolant regulation mechanism for those elephants. If you cut off the elephant's ears, he will not only be deaf, he will die of heat stroke in not too long a time. So the ears regulate the elephant's temperature, sometimes as much as 10 to 16 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty cool, huh? Sometimes, living in St. Louis, I wish I had Asian elephant ears, because it would be able to regulate my heat a little better than I do. Any other questions that you guys have? There you go, my dear.
I heard